So this is my best of movies for 1981. This is the second in my new series. Before we get started with my top 10, a few notables that didn't make the cut. And if you're familiar with the Oscars, you will immediately know that there will be no Chariots of Fire. Good film, but didn't cut it. And Raiders of the Lost Ark, the Steven Spielberg classic action movie with Harrison Ford, didn't make it, I'm afraid. And there are a few others that I might mention. I got it wrong about Atlantic City, putting it in with the 1980. It actually crept into 81, and that it was actually nominated for Best Movie, but again, it wouldn't make the cut anyway. So there are a few others that come to mind, and I'll probably recall them a little bit later. But anyway, let's get started with number 10, and this is Body Heat. This was described as a film noir. Now, noir means a genre of night, guilt, violence and illicit passion, and that just about sums up this movie, which was directed by Lawrence Kasdan, and in the lead roles we have William Hurt, who plays a lazy lawyer named Nad Racing, and the entrance of one Kathleen Turner as a lead actress. She plays Mattie Walker, and other supporting cast: Richard Crenna plays Edward Walker, Dead Danson is Peter Lorenstein, and a very young Mickey Rourke as Teddy Lewis. So anyway, what we've got here is we've got two very powerful performances leading to a passionate relationship between Racine and Walker, and they then he is convinced by his lover to kill and murder a third party, and that's basically what we've got. It's a very hot type of movie. There's lots of smouldering sex scenes in it, but it's very much typical of a genre style movie, but updated to 1980. And so get to watch it. It's called Body Heat. To number 9 then in my top movies of this 1981, and this involves a tremendous set of acting performances, directed by Mark Riddell, and it stars in the lead roles Katharine Hepburn, Henry Fonda and Jane Fonda. Now basically Norman, played by Fonda, and Ethel, played by Hepburn, have come to their cottage retreat to see out their retirement. He's 79 years of age, retired professor. He still enjoys looking at the new jobs, but he's aware that is well past him. And he has a bit of a heart condition, but he spends his time fishing, and basically he's still in love with Ethel, and he's about to have his 80th birthday party, and his only child, Chelsea, played by Fonda, arrives. She's a divorcee, and she's bringing her new boyfriend and his young son, aged 11, called Billy, to the retreat, and they disappear off on a travel holiday, and Billy stays with the elderly couple, and of course we witness a relationship develop between Norman and the young boy at the New England retreat. It's a wonderful movie. It was probably Fonda's last movie, and not surprisingly, it earned a number of awards. It was nominated for Best Film, and it was nominated for Best Actor. Let's have a look at it. Best Actress for Hepburn, and Best Actor for Fonda. His daughter Jane got in on nominations for Supporting Actress. He actually won it was just a nomination for Henry Fonda, and also it won the Adapted Screenplay nomination award. It won the Oscar for that. So all in all, a beautiful film, and it's at number 9 in my best of for 1981. At number 8 is Gallipoli, directed by Peter Weir, and it's got a pretty good cast, but the main protagonists, of course, are Mel Gibson, who plays the lead role of Frank Dunn, and Mark Lee, who plays his friend Archie Hamilton. Of course, in Australian history, Gallipoli is symbolic of a battle that originally took place in the First World War, but latterly took place in the Second at a place in Turkey that was occupied by the Germans, and it was a horrendous battle, and Anzac Day on the 25th of April is celebrated annually by Australia, and it commemorates the original that took place in 1915, when the Australian and New Zealand troops suffered a crushing defeat, and likewise in the Second World War it was also the centre of a huge battle. So basically we've got a war film here, and it's a pretty good one, I must say. It's difficult to say that you enjoy a war film, but it signalled the arrival of Mel Gibson as a class actor, and although it wasn't received very by the Oscars at all, it was nominated for a Golden Globe and for Cinematography of the Year in the Australian Awards. I'd certainly suggest that you get to see it, and that is my number 8, and it did receive lots of awards in the Australian Film Institute awards. So get to watch it. It's called Gallipoli. And number 7 is The French Lieutenant's Woman. It's directed by Carol Rees, and it's written for the screen by Harold Pinter, but it's based on a novel by John Fowles, and it stars in the lead role Sarah Wagstaff, Meryl Streep, and Jeremy Irons plays Charles Smithson. There's a parallel story. Basically, we are using 2 parallel stories here. One that's set in the 1860s, and another which is set at the present day, 1981. And basically, Streep and Irons play 2 roles. The role in 1860, and then the up-to-date role where Streep plays Anna and Irons plays Mike. Basically, the historical romance between Sarah Wagstaff and Charles Smithson, an eligible London bachelor, is the one that has substance, more substance. But the way the movie is portrayed is that we witness what we are led to believe are ghosts of the relationship in 1867 at the time that a film is being shot in 1981 with Anna and Mike in the lead roles. and we witness what we view as the ghost of Sarah Wagstaff at the edge of what they call the Cobb in Lyme Regis, Dorset. It's a fascinating movie. I won't try and continue to explain it in any more depth, but just suggest that you really ought to get to watch it. It's really it's one of those movies that grows on you. Streep had a nomination for lead role as by an actress at the Oscars, and we also had a adapted screenplay nomination for the movie, although it wasn't really, to be honest, it wasn't really that well received. I would suggest you get to watch it. It's the French Lieutenant's Woman, with two lead roles from Meryl Streep and Jeremy Irons. You know you're going to get quality, and that's what I feel about this movie. At number 6 in my top 10 for 1981 is Peacock Tea. It's directed by Hector Babenco. Screenplays in Portuguese with English subtitles by Babenco and Jorge Duran. It's adapted from a book called Infancia dos Moros. It stars in the lead roles Sueli, played by Marila Pera, Zapatos Bancos, played by Charles Filho, and numerous other vitally important people involved in this movie. It's set in Sao Paulo, in the slums. It's a brutal portrayal of the black streets, the pinball parlours, the whorehouses and reform schools that provide us with the events as we snatch a view at drunks, thieves, dopeheads and murder. Some of the graphic scenes involving children being physically and sexually abused are quite haunting as you watch, but you feel as you are watching that you are getting a glimpse of the tough life for orphans, children thrown out by their parents in this tough, relentless city of Sao Paulo in Brazil. So there we have it. I suggest you get to look at it, but be prepared to witness some fairly shocking scenes. But Babenco's work is to be admired and has to be seen to be believed. That's Peacock Tea at number 6 in my top movies for 1981. So to number 5 in my top 10 for 1981, it's Absence of Malice. Sidney Pollack directing this one, and the two lead roles are Paul Newman. He's a victim of a scam, a sham. It's about a newspaper melodrama, and it involves Sally Field as an eager Miami reporter who snaps up a story that the head of a federal strike force investigating the disappearance of a union leader, which is leaked to her, and it takes on a false edit, and the victim of this edit is Paul Newman, and the movie focuses on his efforts to show his innocence and to put the reporting into disrepute. It's a tremendous movie with Newman at his 5-star best. The directing is sharp, and Sally Field is a great foil for Newman's work in this movie. As you may know, I'm a great fan of Paul Newman, and this is one of his best work. So that's Absence of Malice. Now, Absence of Malice did hit the awards show, and of course, not surprisingly, Newman got a nomination for Best Actor. and also we also had original screenplay nomination for Absence of Malice as well, and Melinda Delon had a nomination for Best Supporting Actress for her role in this movie. So get to watch it, Absence of Malice. At number 4 is Looks and Smiles. I've just recently done a full review of this, so just brief information. 1981 British drama film directed by Ken Loach, and it received some awards at the Cannes Film Festival. He won the Young Cinema Award and was also nominated for the Palme d'Or. It's a tremendous piece of work. It's a documentary style film tracing the difficulties for young school leavers, particularly in the UK in the 1980s, early 1980s, when there was basically only two things available. You either joined up as a young male to fight the IRA in Ulster, or you joined the dog queue. It's a dark tale of one Mick Walsh, and the actors were all beginners as such. Mick Walsh, played by Graham Greene, his best friend Alan Wright, played by Tony Pitts, and his girlfriend for most of the movie, Karen Lodge, played by Caroline Nicholson. We witness Mick's attempts in vain to secure work, his wretched sort of life, which is wasteful to the extreme, his attempts to get some sort of pleasure by getting a girlfriend, and it's a tale that's hard but true. It's a real reality check as to Thatcher's Britain at the turn of the 80s. So please get to watch this movie in black and white, Looks and Smiles, directed by Ken Loach, and it's at number 4 in my top 10. So at number 3 is Reds. This is basically Warren Beatty's project. He directed it, he produced it, he was the screenwriter with Trevor Griffiths, and he starred in it alongside Diane Keaton and Jack Nicholson and Maureen Stapleton. It's basically an extremely long movie. It's about the influence politically on Beatty. He becomes a communist, and it starts in 1912 when he meets his character Jack Reed. He meets Louis Bryant Keaton at a lecture, and they become active members of the Communist Party, and they become involved in the eventual revolution in Russia in 1917. And it's a really fascinating movie, and you really need to sit down and spend the 3 hours plus to really get your teeth into it. There's tremendous performances in the awards. It was nominated for Best Movie. It won for Best Direction. Of course, Beatty was nominated for Best Actor, as was Diane Keaton for Actress, as was Nicholson for Supporting Actor, and Maureen Stapleton won for Best Supporting Actress, and it also won the Original Screenplay Oscar. So it's littered with awards. It's a movie that was controversial, to say the least, and some people didn't really forgive Beatty for doing this project. I think it's a magnificent piece of work, and it's at number 3 in my best movies of 1981. At number 2 is For Apache the Bronx. This was a movie that was probably overshadowed, really, by Paul Newman's performance in Absence of Malice. It's directed by Daniel Petrie. It stars Paul Newman, once again in the lead role as a policeman. He plays Murphy. His captain is played by Edward Asner. The character's name Connolly. Paul's partner is Ken Wald, who plays Corelli. Daniela is Morgan, and basically it's a tremendous piece of work. It's set in the Bronx in New York, and it basically is a movie about the ghetto of the South Bronx, and it illustrates the urban decay, the neglect, and the heart of the community is the precinct, and it gets a new station chief, Asner, who wants to try and change the methods that are employed to police the area, and it receives a rather hostile reception. The outside the precinct, the area in the South Bronx is chaos, really. Drug dealing, prostitution, murder, mugging, you name it, it's all to be seen. And early on there's an incident involving a black hooker who decides to exercise her extreme prejudice against two rookie police officers who end up dead. And the movie follows the mystery surrounding that death and the ongoing issues of policing in the area. Great to see it. Paul Newman once again is 5-star material. The man can do nothing wrong as far as I'm concerned. It's number 2 in my top 10. It didn't get any awards, however, but then often the best movies don't. So it's number 2 in my top 10 for 1981, Fort Apache the Bronx. So we're finally at number 1 for 1981. My top movie of that year was The Postman Always Rings Twice. It's a crime drama, a romance, a thriller. It's just about everything, really. And it's directed by Bob Rafelson, and it stars in the lead role Jack Nicholson as Frank Chambers. Supporting him is Jessica Lange, who plays Cora Papadakis. Husband Nick is played by Tom Colisos. Michael Lerner plays Mr. Catch. Angelica Houston plays Madge. And there are various other supporting cast. This, of course, is a remake. In fact, it's been remade twice, but particularly the remake of the 1946 John Garfield version, which was considered to be a classic. This is an updated version. It's got more violence, it's got more sex, it's very graphic, and we witness how Kane arrives at this boarding house come restaurant run by the Papadakis, and he manages to maneuver his way into working for them, but quickly it becomes apparent that Cora is attracted to Frank and Frank is to Cora, and they soon start to develop a passion and a sexual attraction, and then they develop a likeness to move towards eliminating Nick, who is in their way, in their plans. It's a great piece of work. I really suggest you get to watch it. Nicholson is unbelievably powerful in this movie. I can't understand what happened here with regard to nominations, but it seemed to miss the boat, really, and wasn't in any of the awards nominations. But it's certainly my top pick for the year. A gripping thriller that's full of twists and turns, full of a mixture of emotions. Jessica Lange is superb in her role, and I suggest you get to watch it. So that is my take on 1981. That's my top 10. Just around the corner will be 1982.